I want to graph this. In order to graph this, the first thing I want to do is look for my HK. Now my HK are these two numbers. So let me first write the equation for HK. Using HK, it's y equals a x minus h plus k. This right here is the equation of absolute value graphs. A tells you kind of the steepness, slope of the graph. H tells you the horizontal shift, and K tells you the vertical shift. So HK, we're going to focus on HK first. If we find that value, that helps us really easily graph our graph. So for this particular problem, that's your H and that's your K. But do you see this negative H here? That means the opposite of it. So if that's a negative 4, what's the opposite of that? Positive 4. So we're going to start with positive 4, comma 1. This is your HK. So you have HK, and all I do, again, this is your HK, this is a coordinate. I'm going to go over here and plot that point. Over 4, up 1. So plot that dot. That is called your vertex. Okay, we're going to call this your vertex. You had a vertex with parabolas. Okay, it's called your vertex. It's the point on the graph, the edge pointy spot. So that's your point that whole graph kind of shifts by. It's kind of like its hub. And then from there, we're going to create a V. And the V is created by that number right there, the A. The A tells us how we're going to create this. So my A value is -3. So what that is my slope. So from this dot, I'm making a slope of -3, which means I'm going to go down 3 over 1. There's a dot. I'm going to go down 3 over 1. There's another dot. And there's my graph. So we first find our HK, put a dot. We then look at our A value and make a slope. One in each way, one in each direction, so you get a V shape. And then you graphed it. You are done graphing that. So now we're going to problem B. Describe how each number transforms this graph. So let's first just graph this one so we can see it better, how the transformation works. So to graph this one, do you understand my A is 1? My H is 0? And my K is 0? Okay, so it's very simple, basic, called the parent graph of an absolute value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph that one. So is everybody okay your HK is 0, 0? And what's my slope?
1.
A 1. So I'm going to go, okay, up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. Okay, there's the graph. That one, let's just write it on so we can keep track of it. That's the graph. Let's label this one so you remember which one this one is. This is the other graph. It's a -3, x minus 4. Oops, no, that's an absolute value. And plus 1. Got it? We got those labeled now? Terrible handwriting. But so this is our original, and this is our transformation. This is what we're graphing. But the question here is, how did it transform this? How do we transform this black graph to become the red graph? And there are 3 things. We'll talk about each number. We're going to start with number -3. So to start with -3, I'm going to kind of circle that just so that's my number. That's my A value. What did -3 do to our black graph? Well, first of all, did you hopefully notice it flipped it? Did -3 flip it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to put is you flipped it. It flipped. And what else did it do? Well, it kind of made it narrower, didn't it?
Yeah.
Now, narrow is not the word we want. There's a word that's it's kind of confusing, but we're going to call this a vertical stretch. You'll get used to it over time. You just kind of get used to it. It makes more sense later, but this is going to be called a vertical stretch. All right? Now, A value is always a vertical stretch. It could have been a vertical shrink. A vertical shrink would have been if it made it all flat. Okay, remember less than 1? If the A value is less than 1, it'd be a vertical shrink. You're squishing it. You're either stretching it, making it steeper, or you're shrinking it and making it kind of pudgier and flatter. So that's the key word. This word will change, and this word will change on this problem. The vertical is always there. So on this, whenever you do A value, the number in front will always, you either put the word flip or leave it out. Because if it was positive, wouldn't it just be, you don't need the word flip? If it was still in the same direction, you just leave the word flip out. But you always need vertical. You just might change stretch to a shrink depending on what type of A value it is. If it's less than 1 or greater than 1. All right, next one. Let's look at the -4. -4 is telling us to shift left and right. So left and right is called a horizontal shift. It's always going to be a horizontal shift. Just the question is which direction. Well, if you look at this graph, did you notice this point shifted which direction?
To the right.
To the right. How far?
4.
4 units. So it's a horizontal shift 4 units to the right. It might have been easier to say horizontal shift right 4 units. That probably would have been easier. Horizontal shift right 4 units. So what's going to be changing on this one is really just this number, that word, and that number. Got it? You're going to write the same sentence over and over again. It's just, is it going right or left? Now the confusing thing about this, you got to watch out for, is it always goes the opposite direction. Since it's negative, it always goes the opposite, because the formula, remember, is opposite of h. So for graphing purposes, it's always the opposite. Okay? So be careful of that. You're always going to go the opposite direction horizontally. Now vertically, we don't go opposites. For vertically, we just go the direction at which it is. So vertically, that's the 1. The 1 is going to be our vertical shift. And it's going to be up or down on this one. This one's up, and it's 1 unit. So the only things you're going to be changing is this right here. You're going to always say vertical shift for that last number. You just might change it to up or down and the number of how far it went. So this is how it should look. You should have the graph. You don't have on the benchmark, you don't have to put that graph. I just put it so you can see it. Don't worry about it. But you put each number and you describe what it's doing to the graph. Okay, what kind of vertical shift did it do? Did it flip it or not? What kind of horizontal shift is it? In what direction did it go? And what kind of vertical shift is it? In which direction, and up or down, and how far? And that's your description of what happened verbally. Okay, this is the hardest one, this word stretch and shrink. That'll be stretch or shrink. This will be left or right. That'll be up or down, depending on the situation of what's happening.